and I don't mean to be condescending here. I just point out what's going to replace your glasses. Like,
So
why
I
would you
do
wear your
know,
glasses around your face. They're made of plastic.
maybe.
No,
I don't know what they're made out of.
They are. What about, and I just point out some things here because I just want to be realistic when we're having conversations, because when statements are made like this. Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Bradford, in your testimony, did I understand you right? So that you want to end all plastic manufacturing?
I said the plastics industry must be stopped.
So does that mean end plastic manufacturing?
I mean, in my dream world, sure, but I think that, go ahead.
No, so and I don't mean to be condescending here. I just point out what's going to replace your glasses. Like,
So
why
I
would you
do
wear your
know,
glasses around your face. They're made of plastic.
maybe.
No,
I don't know what they're made out of.
They are. And I just point out some things here because I just want to be realistic when we're having conversations, because when statements are made like this, I just want to open people's eyes and say, well, okay, that's easy to say, but what's the solution? Your water bottle in front of you.
This one?
Yes. That plastic?
No.
The lid is. That's plastic.
Right. So
Right.
I would say to your
cell phone-
question that I would first be concerned about single-use plastics, and then we can talk about alternatives to this.
Your cell phone there. Is it plastic?
The cases, but it's glass because I broke
The components
the
inside of it's
screen
not
yesterday.
plastic? The components made out of it's not plastic? Yeah, they are. The water that you filled that water bottle up with, where'd you fill that water bottle up out of?
A water filling station.
All right, and it was delivered by a drink station that was plastic?
I didn't check.
The edges are. The piping coming to it. Now, you have a couple of choices with the piping. We could go back to using wood, but then you have to line it in chemical. Or we could go back and use lead, because we used to have water piping that was lead. That was harmful to us. We go back to galvanized, but galvanized rust and had discoloration. We go back to copper, but copper has to be mined, and everybody wants to stop mining in the U.S. So you use plastic to deliver piping that you fill that water bottle up with today. I point this out because the clothes you have on, I guarantee have plastic in it. The shoes you have on your feet, the soles of those shoes are plastic. So we talk about any plastic manufacturing, and everybody in here cheers when you say that, but everybody here is depending on plastic as you set. So if you want to end it, then quit using it. It's kind of like, I don't shop at certain places right now because I don't agree with some of their policies. I choose not to do that. You can choose to not use plastic. Do your work. If you believe it, then live it that way. And if not, then tell me what the solution is. Mr. Sunday, can you manufacture a car today without plastic? Because we talked about manufacturing, the chairman brought up manufacturing cars as it is safe. But the components that go into the cars today, can you do that without plastic?
No, Senator, increasingly so with the new mileage mandates. You increasingly need to use automotive components that are plastics derived.
So we wouldn't have manufacturing, today's modern manufacturing, if we didn't have plastics, correct?
Correct.
Ms. Jackson, do you agree with that statement?
Yes.
So what's the alternative for manufacturing? Because the Democrats talk about middle-class wages. Middle-class wages typically come directly from manufacturing. What is it that we're manufacturing that doesn't have plastic in it today?
Nothing. And you know what? It would increase the cost of everything if we turn to an alternative, and it would disproportionately impact low-income people who have lower incomes. It would be another regressive tax on the poor.
So according to your testimony, Ms. Jackson, it sounds like you're saying that the environmental justice agenda does more harm than good for low-income families. Is that correct?
Yes. And, you know, I have the unique opportunity to see both sides when the industry comes in the area and when it doesn't. As an auditor, I worked on Nissan North America. Nissan North America moved to Smyrna, Tennessee, where it built the largest automotive manufacturing plants. And the transformation was astonishing. I mean, it went from a community that was poor to a community that U.S. World News voted one of the top 10 places to retire. You had poor people in areas that were poor that became middle class. You had middle class people that became upper middle class, and a lot of upper middle class people that became affluent. They have attractions, they have amenities, they have housing, affordability. I mean, the amount of prosperity in that area has resonated out three counties. I've also had the opportunity to see when an industrial, and that wouldn't happen if you don't have an industrial complex moving into the area where you're talking about high economics. I've also seen the other side where all of a sudden you have deteriorating buildings, empty storefronts, dilapidated housing, people standing on street corner housing, that families that are broken. So we need to balance the fact that people's lives need economic upward mobility. And we can't just say, we're going to take out an industry and leave people poorer than they were. Poverty causes the worst health care in this country. Poverty is the one that destroys lives. It destroys health. It creates trauma. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about these issues, we take into account the human loss of life, not just the environmental impacts.
Thank you. Thanks for indulgence.
And that was the moment when Senator Markwayne Mullin pointed directly, physically, socially, materially, right at the object sitting in front of a witness who claimed she wanted to stop the plastics industry. And he quietly, calmly, surgically, item by item, dismantled the idea that the modern world can function while pretending it is not built on plastic. Her glasses, her water bottle, her phone, her clothing, the delivery infrastructure that pumped the water she drank into the room. It was an explosion delivered without volume. Because what Mullin did in those simple, almost polite questions was force the hearing to confront something Washington almost never says out loud. Rhetorical absolutism has a cost. Political fantasies have consequences. Moral posturing requires actual engineering reality. The actual material economy is made out of atoms, not tweets, not vibes, not press releases. This is the exact place where Congress becomes one of the last real rooms left in America where reality is still allowed to speak. And then Ms. Jackson, with one of the most politically dangerous, non-performative statements made in this hearing, confirmed the deeper explosive point. Eliminating plastics without replacement and without industrial strategy doesn't make poor Americans safer. It makes them poorer. It becomes a regressive tax. It becomes a material assault on mobility. It becomes a moral luxury belief for the affluent, paid for by those with the least buffer. Because it is easy to demonize the machine when you're not depending on the machine to escape poverty. That is a sentence that should echo. That is a sentence Washington should have to say out loud every day. Because a nation that simultaneously demands the end of mining, the end of petrochemicals, the end of manufacturing, while also demanding low-cost goods, middle-class wages, cheap energy, abundant medicine, universal health care, and miracle climate timelines, is a nation that demands miracles without acknowledging the physics. This hearing exposed a fault line that is bigger than plastics. This hearing exposed a foundational fracture in the way America debates. Moral absolutism versus material realism. Political branding versus physical reality, utopian intent versus human consequences. Ms. Jackson described seeing it herself. She described watching a poor region transform because manufacturing arrived. She described watching mobility, real mobility, not marketed, not rhetorical, not an Instagram infographic, but actual multi-generational wealth lift. A factory turning a county into one of the top 10 places in the nation to retire. That is not theory. That is not think tank poetry. That is what industrial policy actually does when it works. And she described the decay when you remove industry, empty storefronts, broken families, trauma, declining health, loss of purpose, loss of mobility, collapse. America has already lived this film across hundreds of counties. There is nothing hypothetical about it. This hearing, more than many before it, was not actually about plastic versus anti-plastic. It was about whether the American political class is capable of telling the truth about trade-offs, whether government will still acknowledge the physical substrate civilization actually sits on, whether morality can be more than brand aesthetic. Mullin's final line, "If you believe it, live it," was not a dunk. It was a diagnosis. Our politics is full of slogans that people demand other people pay for, commands that sound righteous but collapse into incoherence the moment they are required to be lived personally. Activism that requires no sacrifice from the activist and enormous sacrifice from the poor. The American project cannot survive like that. Real justice requires friction. Real sustainability requires engineering. Real moral policy requires discipline, patience, trade-off literacy, and the courage to abandon slogans that fail contact with matter. Industrial America is not the enemy. In many ways, it has been the most powerful anti-poverty engine this country ever built. And if this country abandons it, we are abandoning millions who will never have the luxury of replacing it with a political fantasy. This moment today matters because it forces us to ask a question deeper than plastics. Do we want to govern in the real world, or do we want to govern in a symbolic world made entirely of metaphor? Because the real world is made of atoms, and the real world still decides whether people rise into prosperity or collapse into poverty. That is the truth this hearing forced into daylight, and that is the truth this country has avoided for too long. If America is going to survive this century, economically, geopolitically, morally, we must become a nation where the people who speak the loudest about justice are willing to be held accountable to the consequences of the systems they demand we dismantle. The work of democracy is not to deny the world we live in. The work of democracy is to make the world we live in better, with honesty, with real costs, and with real courage. This has been the Congress Brief. Subscribe and stay awake.